So let's talk about 2025, because this was the year the Cold War over microchips, well, it got hot. We're talking about the United States and China, two absolute titans going head-to-head. But they're not fighting over land. Nope, they're fighting over these tiny little silicon wafers that, let's be honest, run our entire world. So today, we're going to break down all the big moves, the counter moves, and figure out what's really at stake in this incredible fight for the future.
And it really all kicked off with this sentiment right here. I mean, the Trump administration was asking a question that was on a lot of people's minds. Wait a second, American companies need these chips, so why are American workers not making them? How did we get to a point where one company, TSMC in Taiwan, makes over 90% of the most advanced chips on the planet? And you have to understand, this wasn't just about economics. This was being framed as a huge national security issue. And that idea, right there, is what lit the fuse for everything that went down in 2025.
So how does that one idea explode into a full-blown global tech war? Well, to really get what happened in 2025, you've got to look at it like a giant, high-stakes game of chess. Seriously, every action we're about to talk about was a strategic move, a calculated play on a global chessboard, with the ultimate prize being, you guessed it, total technological dominance.
All right, let's get into it. So America kicked off 2025 with a major offensive. Their game plan was pretty clear, really. Two main goals. First, slow down China's rapidly growing tech sector. And second, bring all that high-tech chip manufacturing back home to the US. And they didn't waste any time. Look at this timeline from early 2025. It shows a full-on, multi-front attack. In January, you've got the Defense Department adding huge Chinese tech companies. We're talking CXMT, Tencent, CAT, CL, to a list of firms they say are linked to China's military. That's a huge deal. At the same time, they're boosting things at home with the STAR Act, which is basically a big financial incentive, tax credits for companies that design and make chips in the US. Then in February, they turn up the heat on Taiwan, threatening massive tariffs on their chips. This wasn't just one move. It was a coordinated, full-court press from every angle. Okay, so with all that pressure, you'd think China might back down, right? No way. They weren't just going to sit there and take it. Instead, feeling backed into a corner, Beijing launched a massive counteroffensive of its own. Their goal? Simple but incredibly ambitious. Build a completely self-sufficient semiconductor industry, one that didn't need anyone else. And how do you do that? Well, you start with money, a lot of money. Check this out. $47 billion. That's the size of China's third big fund, which got rolling right at the start of 2025. And that money had a very specific target: develop their own homegrown equipment, the super advanced tools you need to make cutting-edge chips.
And did it work? Well, the results came in pretty quick. Take a look at these numbers for AMSIC, one of China's key equipment makers. Their sales growth was huge. I mean, a 45% jump overall. But look at their etching equipment sales. That's the stuff that carves the super tiny circuits onto the silicon. A nearly 55% jump. This is the proof right here that the big investment was already starting to pay off.
But it wasn't just about throwing money at the problem. It was also about strategy. China reportedly started pushing to merge around 200 of its smaller chip tool companies into just 10 big players. Think about it. They're trying to create a few national champions, super companies big and powerful enough to compete with the giants in the rest of the world.
Now, this whole conflict wasn't just happening between the US and China in a vacuum. The United States started using its international partnerships, moving its allies around like pieces on that chessboard we talked about. This really started to shuffle the deck for everyone in the industry.
And to understand why these alliances were so important, you just have to look at this chart. Look at that massive blue slice. That's TSMC. They control almost 65% of the market for making advanced chips for other companies. I mean, Intel's not even in the top 10 here. So for Washington, the strategy became crystal clear. If you can influence TSMC, you can influence the entire game.
This intense focus on TSMC led to a whole storm of rumors about a potential alliance with Intel. And we're talking about some wild stuff. The US government was reportedly pushing for TSMC to share its manufacturing magic with Intel's factories. There was even talk of a joint venture, or get this, TSMC buying a 20% stake in Intel's foundry business. You can imagine for competitors like Samsung, the idea of these two giants teaming up was, well, a total nightmare. So you have all this political and economic maneuvering happening in the background. But at the end of the day, the real front line of this war, it was all about the technology itself. It was a flat-out race to see who could build the next generation of chips. And the main event in 2025 was the battle for the 2-nanometer node. You had Intel with its 18A process, which introduced this awesome new tech called PowerVia for better performance. And on the other side, you had TSMC with its N2 process. The big story here is that for the first time in a long time, Intel wasn't just playing catch-up. With things like its SRAM density reportedly matching TSMC's, they were actually in the running to take the lead. This was huge, a major comeback story in the making.
And neither side is slowing down. Intel scored a massive contract with Microsoft for its 18A chips, and it looks like Google and NVIDIA are interested too. But TSMC isn't just sitting still. They've got their N2 process in production, and they're already talking about their next steps, A16 in 2026 and a 1.4-nanometer chip by 2028. This race is just getting faster and faster.
So as 2025 comes to a close, it's pretty obvious this whole thing is far from over. In fact, it feels like it's just getting started. All the moves made this year have basically just set up a brand new chessboard for 2026, and it leaves us with some really big questions.
So what should we be watching for in 2026? It really boils down to these four key battlegrounds. First, the U.S. onshoring effort. Will all that CHIPS Act money and political pressure actually work? Will they build a leading-edge supply chain in America? Second, China's self-sufficiency push. Can all that investment really overcome not having access to key foreign tools, like the ones from ASML? Third, the future of these alliances. What's going to happen with this potential Intel-TSMC team-up, and how will someone like Samsung react? And finally, the big one. Who's going to be the technology leader? Will Intel's comeback be real, or will TSMC just keep pulling ahead? The answers to these questions are going to define who holds the power.
And this really might be the most important question of all. Can China's domestic tech actually catch up when it's blocked from getting the world's best chip-making equipment? I mean, export controls are the main weapon the U.S. is using, so this is a huge hurdle for China to overcome.
And at the same time, the U.S. has its own massive question mark. Is this multi-billion-dollar bet on bringing advanced chip manufacturing back home actually going to succeed? It is a giant gamble with a huge potential payoff, but also a very real risk of failure. The stakes couldn't be higher.
So when you look back, 2025 was a year of really bold moves in this great game for tech supremacy. The board has been completely reset. The players know the stakes. And it brings to mind that old quote from Sun Tzu, "Opportunities multiply as they are seized." The moves made in 2025 created a whole new set of opportunities. The only question now is, who is going to seize them in 2026?